Alabama was a smaller scale of 2020 during that 2022 primary.
Yeah, that's what I understand. Yeah. Very, very similar, very clear to see.
Oh, and if I may, there's one other point that relates us to a sheriff's county race in Spotsylvania, Virginia.
ES&S machines as well?
Oh, that's the link. Down to the version. Down to the same exact version. This sheriff who was going to investigate election laws and the issues, right? He campaigned on that. He was killing it in the polls, right? Even in exit polls, he was done. But guess what? It was like almost his percentages were flipped. And they exactly matched the same percentage point to like 0.1 or 0.2 decimal point of the 5 different races in Alabama. Same year, same time, same system. Could we say same algorithm?
Was the F curve present in that flipping? Did you see the shoot up right there at the end?
I had yet to get.
Clay, thank you so much for coming on.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So first things first, I want to ask the question where it all started for me. When I first woke up, paid attention, knew something was off, and that was the 2020 election. So I have to ask you, was the 2020 election stolen?
Yes, it was. It was most definitely stolen. And there's plenty of evidence to support that.
Now, anybody that pays attention to what's going on with our elections would agree that we should get rid of our voting machines. Donald Trump is actually pushing for that as well. And you mentioned Wyoming. I did hear about that Wyoming looked like was going to be the first state to get rid of the voting machines. And from what I understand, the Secretary of State called you as an expert witness for Wyoming. Is that correct?
Well, I met, that was actually for a Senate hearing. The senator that sponsored the bill asked me to testify for that. And the funny thing is I met with the Wyoming Secretary of State a couple of times, more than I've, Wes Allen promised to have a meeting with several election integrity people and me be there. He's yet to fulfill that one.
I'm not surprised.
But yet Wyoming Secretary of State's a stand-up guy. He actually invited me and another election expert to come on. He had citizens in his office. Of course, he had his attorney there, but he asked a lot of specific questions. And the funny thing is for him, he's having to fight his own AG, and they've got a lot of people. I'm not going to say a lot of people. In each county, usually, there's that one person they can rely on that's going to keep the machines around and make sure elections do not change. And they give him a lot of pushback. And so that's the struggle. And I see that in a lot of states. You've got the good people within the state. They're trying to get some, whether it's a state representative or a senator that'll be pushing for a bill, but yet they've got to fight everything else. Just like You've got the Probate Judges Association trying to control Montgomery, right, as far as HB 30.
Right.
And, it's just that way.
And from what I understand, they had a bill to get rid of the voting machines, and the state legislature voted it down? That what happened?
It spent like 3 days in Senate hearing, so their bill never made it to the floor.
It never came out of committee.
South Dakota was the same way. It died in their hearing. It was like, what was it, 4 to 5 vote, I believe, one vote off from getting to the floor. And I thought South Dakota actually had probably a better chance, although I read both bills. I got asked to review them. I thought Wyoming's bill was better written. But again, both those states, and they're continuing to fight.
Okay, that's good. That's good to hear. Yeah. Now, before we get too far into the podcast, I want to go ahead and tell the audience, we're going to talk about a lot of things that are going to be hard to understand. But the best way to kind of keep up and get informed about what we're talking about in this podcast, make sure to go to YouTube and look up Let My People Go documentary. You actually have to type in official Let My People Go documentary, and it will pull up. Google does not make it easy to find. So please watch that with David Clements. That guy is my hero. That documentary is one of the most powerful documentaries. I would say the most powerful documentaries I've ever seen in my life.
It exposes all the corruption.
Everything. It's all there in one documentary. I've never seen one put together so well with just everything in one place where you can go see it. Another thing that we have to mention, Selection Code with Tina Peters. That is, Tina Peters is somebody, that did her job like a lot of election officials. I believe, what was her position? Yeah,
she was a county clerk.
County clerk, that's right.
The elections board county clerk for Mesa County, and I can state that because I read Colorado law and I read the state election rules, and she did not violate anything. And that's what I have to do in every state I go to. It's one of the things I've even read state constitutions in order to make sure that their laws were actually legitimate, because, you can't make a state law that violates your own constitution. Legislator can't do that. And so I reviewed all that. I wrote up my declaration, or it was an affidavit in the case of Colorado. I wrote up the affidavit, but yet the judge said it was irrelevant for what I'd written, to say that she bought, and I couldn't testify on that. They brought me in to testify on another video clip and piece of something for her case. But what was infuriating about the way she was treated for doing her job and actually following the law and the rules, and then they convicted her. And it was deemed irrelevant when I was going to say it on her behalf, how she did nothing wrong. But then the prosecution on closing arguments was able to argue to that point.
Such an unjust situation. I mean, again, to the audience that's listening, selectioncode.com. Please go look at that. Again, Tina Peters did her job, protected our vote. And I have to say, the judge that prosecuted her is the worst case of corruption and a compromised individual as I've ever seen in my life. And I cannot tell you how much that infuriated me.
Oh, I was wiped out for 3 days. It just mentally being up there, that whole case, everything, me getting jerked around the way I was. And I get Professor David Clements, when we were talking about it, and he told me, he said, Clay, well, the thing is you think our judicial system is under a constitutional republic. He goes, but that was a Marxist court. He goes, what you think is our judicial system no longer exists. And I mean, he was dead on the money with that.
And it's so sad because, the Let My People Go, the documentary, if you go down to the views in YouTube, it has said 59,000 views for the past 6 months.
Yeah.
There's no way. There's no way. I've shared it with everybody. Everybody's watching that. And then you look at David Clements' social media. Again, audience, go to Facebook, look up David Clements. Please find him. It is so clear to see he's being throttled in the algorithm, censored. And he's talking about some of I would say, the very most important information in this country today. Mm-hmm. And it's just so sad what they're doing to him.
Oh yeah, and and he's been through a lot. And here was the thing: we even in Huntsville, when we had our event up there, and I'd asked him to come, and we brought him in. And the best thing is you watch that movie, and then he'll answer the questions, and he'll demonstrate things for the people to take control back, because our government. The best thing about that movie was it covered all the corruption, from the COVID scam through it all into those poor J6ers. And here, the thing about the J6ers is I don't care if they would have been liberal leftists up there burning the American flag, just saying that the U.S. to be locked up for the amount of time that they did those people, and just totally fabricated.
Yeah.
I just referred to that whole ordeal as it's a Fedsurrection.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, if it would have been the radical left doing the same thing, everybody would have stood down and nothing would have ever happened.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, we saw how January 6th was obviously instigated. There was paid instigators in the crowd, many different things that we've seen. I know we can get into that forever, but
yeah, well,
it's a false flag.
The most important thing your audience needs to know about that is that the Republican side of the House had the appropriate senator. They had all the things to challenge the Electoral College and that vote that was being sent forward. And so notice, but then the riot started, right?
Yeah.
And that got interrupted, and that caused the pause. Because remember, in 2016, the Democrats tried to do the same thing, but they didn't have a senator sign off or whatever it was. They didn't follow the formality to challenge. And all that was there, and then it got interrupted. And then a few hours later, all of a sudden, everybody's minds changed. And it was a federal psyop to stop the challenge because the votes were being questioned. And I'm telling you, I've looked at so many states and so much evidence from 2020 that it was stolen clear as day. And people could argue, well, where's your evidence when or even, Dr. Haldeman, who's written plenty of stuff, could testify to that there'd be no proof. That's how bad the systems are. They're so vulnerable. There'd be no evidence. And so that's the biggest thing out of it all is even if you get past that, whether it's intentional or not, the vote should have never been certified, period. Whether 100%. It was intentional or just a pure accident, there's no way that election should have been certified, let alone at county levels, at state levels, to include the Electoral College, at the national level.
Yeah, January 6th will always be remembered as the day that the government staged a false flag in order to cover a fraudulent election.
1,000%.
Create a distraction. Yeah, it's so easy to see if you take any amount of time looking into it.
Mm-hmm. It is.
The next thing I want to get into, Clay, is so you were a Kari Lake's expert witness in Arizona. Would you mind going into that briefly and explaining how that looked, being on the inside in the courtroom, and how bad was the corruption out there compared to some other places?
Oh, I would say they're number 2 in corruption. I mean, they got a lot of media hype, but nobody, I hate to say it, SEC aside, Georgia's number 1 when it comes to the corruption that goes on. Yeah, they beat us out. We run a close third, maybe, but Maricopa County, just the county alone, is totally corrupt.
Okay.
The way that everything was presented in court and what the judge allowed them to get away with. On the face, he came across as a fair judge. The courtroom was run well, but it was so much in favor of the way the defense presented things and the way the court viewed things that was just unbelievable. For example, for Scott Jarrett to get up on day 2 and basically flip everything that he had said, of having no knowledge that it occurred in 2020 and the 2022 primary and then the 2022 election, and the 2020 primary, he said. So that's so this is the 4th time that this so-called glitch with the ballot images has happened. And 2, it was a different ballot image size. So you're saying there was so much illogical lying that went on, and yet the judge just neglected to do anything about it.
Okay, Clay, now, so I have to ask about the Chinese code that you found in a voting machine in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a little bit about that? And that just so happens to be the same company, the
Yes.
ES&S, that you found that code in that we also use in Alabama.
Yes, it's a ES&S system, and there were Chinese certificates on the systems. And here's the thing: when you can open a certificate up in a text editor or any kind of other application and look at it, and there'll be some coding issues with the way the application interprets it, and so sometimes there'll be mixed up characters. But what further concerned me when I saw these certificates, and I saw when you read the regular metadata that'll show on like a Windows store, right? And so China. So I said, let me look at these things. And so then I opened them up, and I said, maybe I've got the encoding wrong, and I change it. And the constant thing is, when I changed it, it didn't make normal sense. But when I left it in one encoding, it was a 100% match on Chinese characters. It was written in Chinese. And so that doesn't anybody that knows software and knows programming languages and stuff and understands, you can encode in a different language and the viewer's going to interpret things different. You may see, some Chinese characters pop up. You could see emojis even. You'll see different things. Most people would say, oh, it's just gobbledygook. But to match 100%, just further confirm that this is a Chinese certificate on a U.S. election system with Chinese code in it. And so it's like, why? And just so the audience understands, these certificates, these X509 certificates, are used for communication devices. They're the thing that establishes trust. So like when you go on Amazon and you buy some new golf clubs or you want to get new shoes or whatever you're doing, there's a certificate exchange that happens between you, your workstation, your laptop, your computer, and their servers. And it establishes a trust, and then there's layers of security that go on to make sure that when you put your credit card number in, right, that everything's secure and nobody can steal your data. And so these certificates, why would you need a certificate to trust something in China? Is the one thing. Yeah.
In the movie Let My People Go, they mentioned Chinese components are found in our voting machines.
Yes.
Could you explain that? I'm assuming just because our voting machines are primarily made in China. Is that correct?
Yes. So I first want to give a little bit background on why I can really speak to this supply chain issue is because when a vendor takes their voting system to certification, they have to provide what's called a technical data package. And one of the requirements to be included in this technical data packages is a source for where their parts and everything comes from. And remember, I was in the labs from 2008 to 2017. And so every technical data package I looked at, when you went to their listing and who their suppliers were, there would be the same email address, but from different countries. And then there were like different phone numbers. It was totally bogus. There's no supply chain security of where the parts even come from. So when I was analyzing them, I'd say, hey, this stuff, I would tell the labs, this stuff looks messed up. And so the components there's some things as far as the Chinese, I can't really divulge yet. Hopefully in a few months, it'll become public anyway. Let's just say no matter where they claim to make these things, whether it's coming out of Texas or not, probably not. It's probably been diverted covertly from China to Texas and gets shipped from there. And they claim it's Texas made, but that's a major issue. And we could spend an hour talking about on their efforts. The Chinese literally have buildings with nothing but hackers that attempt to attack the infrastructure.
Well, I believe they did tell us decades ago that they will destroy America without firing a shot, that they don't have to invade us. And it sounds like that's exactly how they're doing it.
And that's the truth. And, and I say this as a Marine because I've never been a thing for nuclear devices. And when people start talking about nuclear wars and all that, I'm like, no, it's not going to happen because you're a much badder. To take somebody down without pulling the trigger, it's one thing when you've got the largest gun in the gunfight, right? Or you've got a gun and they've only got a knife. Yeah, you're going to win. But to come in and for me not to touch you, not to shoot you, throw a rock at you and bring you down. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're involved with helping to manipulate elections. I honestly think they own the majority of the politicians in the U.S., and they manipulate it. And that's why the United States is in the chaos it's in.
So another thing that was mentioned in the documentary, Let My People Go, was fractional voting.
Yeah.
Could you explain that a little bit? I know they did in the documentary, but maybe there's some insight that you could provide to that.
So, and here's the thing, and I have to credit black box voting. When I first learned about this, Bev Harris, who runs that, she had ran across Benny Smith, who's a Democrat up in Tennessee. I met him. He's a stand-up guy, definitely different political sides of the aisle, but he wants free and fair elections too. And he, a brilliant guy, discovered this feature called GEMS, which does it. And what's funny is that was about 2014. I'd been in the lab, so when I saw a report, I'm like, wait, Why do we have 3.74 for votes counted? 1 vote plus 1 vote is 2 votes. Add another vote is 3 votes. How do you get the fractional number? And then the lab, they would just say, "Oh, it's a feature for future stuff." I said, "Was that feature enabled?" And they would never answer me. And so fractional voting is when especially what people in Alabama need to know is ranked choice voting is fractional voting. Dominion has the utility used to be called GEMS. They've renamed it, but Dominion controls that. But ES&S is just equally as bad because they have this ranked choice voting. That's fractional voting. And here's what everybody say, well, we don't do ranked choice voting in Alabama. But you have to understand, on these very vulnerable machines that we use from ES&S, they have ranked choice voting capability. Just look at their test reports. As somebody who's played the bad guy for the U.S. government, believe me, a hacker gets into that system, they can do fractional voting. They can manipulate the data and make it a switch who wins and who loses. And it's just that simple. And that's what people have to understand. They call it fractional voting. That's what it originally was pitched at and known. But our ES&S systems have ranked choice voting capability. That capability, just like the capabilities we have of Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, make these systems highly vulnerable. And I can list over 300 vulnerabilities,
And from what I understand, since these chips that are in our voting machines are made in China, they can have a chip the size of a piece of dust that will allow someone to access these machines remotely and turn any of these features on and off. So it's not like it has to be set before the machine's dropped off and then just whatever happens, happens. It can actually be changed in real time, especially with the Wi-Fi capability and confirmation that we have that they're connected to Wi-Fi now as well.
Yeah, and here's the thing: everybody's familiar with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and those are known protocols. There are other protocols that exist that can be used to transmit data.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, well, there's a lot I can't speak to now. Let's just say there may be a protocol similar to what one of our 3-letter agencies use on these actual voting systems. And I can't really say too much more about that. But you're right on the processors. For example, I just retired or didn't retire. I didn't have enough time, but I had quit at Northrop Grumman because, I wanted to retire. They even broadcast, because our processor, one of the most powerful one, it's like a speck of sand. It sits on the finger top, and that's what we showed on our internet site is that processor, because we won an award for it. And they are that hard and that hard to see and find. And think about it. We've got processors that could sit on your fingertip and look like a speck of sand, and can process data. And how is a normal person going to detect that? How many people actually even look at a motherboard, right, or any of the boards on the systems?
Yeah, I don't think we've ever opened a voting machine in Alabama that I'm aware of. No one in the public's ever seen the inside of them.
And so these processors and these Chinese-made parts lead into that supply chain management, right? Even if you have it. For example, when I worked for the Threat Systems Management Office and played bad guy, we had to order our parts. Of course, they cost more, but all of our servers, all of our equipment had to come from one, because that supplier had global supply chain management. They were known to be secure. Another time earlier on, when we did a contract DoD, early on in my career, the stuff was sent to the Pentagon. We couldn't go there and build it yet. It was much later. Why? Because they tore every server, switch, and router apart and examined it. And that's they look for these miniature processors, all that stuff. They physically examined it. Then they notified us. We went up there, built these systems. And then again, that was it. We were told to leave because we weren't even cleared at the classification level they were getting moved to. Then they took them all apart and moved them. And that's the extent that DoD goes through. And that does not exist in any way, shape, or form with our voting systems.
So you think that at DOD that possibly a chip was overlooked, or maybe one was found and they were just instructed not to talk about it? What would you think?
There have been chips missed on the DOD side. Colonel Sean Smith's even spoken to this because that was part of what he did in the Air Force. And so when DOD misses it, that says a whole lot, and that tells you how complicated and hard it is. And that does not exist when it comes to voting systems. When you look at the technical data package, you just look at the chart. I've always been tempted, my stuff's older now, but I was always tempted just to call these numbers and actually see if the line was even connected. It was just on the face of it, to look at the supply table, you could tell this was just hodgepodge thrown together because they had to have something. Where the parts actually came from or what they consisted of is unknown.
This brings to mind the situation in Baldwin County when they did the demonstration of the voting machines and they put the copied ballots. I believe it was Angela Shepard, made copied ballots. There were copies, not the same paper stock. This is something else that was in, Let My People Go, the documentary. Yeah. And the machine counted every one of those ballots. Mm-hmm. So that showed us right there that feature was deactivated, even though that it did have that feature. Is that something that you're aware that was instructed by the Secretary of State, or they're just not required to have it on in Alabama? How did that happen?
I can't speak to whether it was the Secretary of State's direction, but what I would tell you is but that's an ES&S system, so it checks for the paperweight and the type of ink. It's even again, believe me, I have the technical data packages. I know I worked in the voting system test labs. This is stuff they state that you have to use this certain type of paperweight, and that feature's turned off. What I can tell you, not in Alabama, because we won't share data with the citizens or residents of Alabama.
Right.
We hide that. Why? In other states with the ES&S machine, I've seen it to where it's been turned on right before logic and accuracy and gets turned off after. And we didn't even have it on during the logic. When Angela and there was another gentleman in a different county did the same thing, when we did those tests, it wasn't enabled. So therefore, it would take any ballot. And it doesn't have to be that, they say, well, nobody could ever get 8 in. It's the fact that one went through and it was a forged document. It was counterfeit.
That's one too many.
Yeah, that's one too many. And that means that that feature was not enabled. And it should have been. Why did you disable a security feature? Now, if we want to talk about direction of Secretary of State, we can start talking about John Merrill and the whole ballot imaging.
Yeah.
And how, storage space and all that, which is a total lie. I know. I've advised, and the sad thing is it's in other states, I've advised the Georgia State Election Board on the technical aspects of what these systems claim and what they can hold image size-wise. I'm also a forensic auditor, and so what I'll tell you is when you don't save all the ballot images, you're now treating your votes being treated different from mine. Why? Because you did a write-in and I didn't. They didn't save my ballot image, right? This is what goes on in the state of Alabama. From a forensic standpoint, I have to have every piece of the pie. And to save some ballot images because they were write-ins or needed adjudication is wrong. You cannot prove it. And again, the ballot images are what's analyzed, not the paper. And that's what people have to understand. They'll claim paper, yet they never let you see it. And then in the paper is only one piece of it. You have to have the ballot image because that image is what gets analyzed. And as we all know, the ballot images can even be manipulated. That was proven back in 2019 at DEF CON.
Now, as far as that being an issue, obviously that's important. But in Alabama, the way our elections work is we didn't have drop boxes. Mm-hmm. So while one of our machines should never accept any fake ballots, obviously our biggest problem is the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth connectivity. Now, we saw in the Haynes versus Merrill lawsuit, I believe it was Focus on America that sued John Merrill, and I believe you were actually present at that hearing. Is that correct?
Yes, I testified.
So I remember that in 22, John Merrill was going around to grassroots groups, and he was being asked, are the voting machines in Alabama connected to Wi-Fi and Bluetooth? Of course, he said, no, absolutely not. We have the gold standard of elections in Alabama. We have nothing to worry about here in Alabama as far as our elections are concerned. Well, then, thanks to the Hayes versus Merrill lawsuit, when it went to court, a judge ordered the release of the lease agreement. Is that correct, with ES&S? And it showed that there was, in fact, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connectivity to our polling laptops?
Well, basically, the evidence that I know we presented was what I had acquired when I went down to Crenshaw County. Because they had a county commissioner and the probate judge down there had questions, and they didn't want the county to be sued. They were trying to do their job correct. So an attorney from down there contacted me. So I drove down to Crenshaw County, south of here, about 4.5 hour drive for me. And I went in and I asked some questions. They provided me the letters, the billing thing. So basically, you ordered this type. The purchase order had listed on it Bluetooth and Wi-Fi capabilities, right? It had Wi-Fi 6, matter of fact, the card, top of line cards in the system. They had to order that. Of course, the state's going to pay for it. Why do that? Because I think it was at 1819 News. They had Merrill's thing and some other election official, but I can't remember who said what. But they also made the statement that they didn't have the capability. With those cards, when you're telling the counties, the probate judges to order these systems per this spec, and it has Bluetooth and wireless cards on it, that you've lied. You've lied to the public. They have the capability, and you can say you disable them. So I'm just telling you what I used to do, because I just retired. I would check vendors when they would come into our environment to do that, because whether you're IBM or you're one of the video tech guys that come in and do a conference room and you do this, you bring your corporate laptop in, we would have to check it because it's a classified area. They'd say, oh, it's disabled. And they would show it to me, right? And then I'd say, well, let's go check it in the BIOS, and we would see it. And then they would boot it up. And then guess what? Windows turned the Wi-Fi back on. And where I was at Northrop Grumman, the Wi-Fi cards were physically removed. We had information security officers set with techs up in Colorado, even part of the program, out of where I worked at here in Huntsville, supported that as well, to make sure the cards were removed, because you can't have them in, because if they're there, they can be re-enabled. And that's the point. And so the capability was there, and they made this statement that they weren't capable of it. And then John Merrill at the North Alabama Republican Luncheon, when he spoke, said, well, oh, yeah, but that's only for unofficial results. So for the residents of Alabama that don't understand, that election management server that sends those unofficial results is the same one that sends the official election results. Right? Whether they're burnt to a CD and sent down to Montgomery or however your county claims to do it, it's the same exact system. And once connected to the internet, it's been compromised. And so again, and we have it on video, him saying that, for unofficial, it's the same system. We get told lie after lie, at all levels, whether it's the county or state officials.
And of course, anybody with half a brain that at least tried to think logically about this, how would our votes be able to be uploaded in real time if there was no Wi-Fi connectivity? So that's kind of proof of it right there, isn't it? Oh,
yeah. And they'll say, oh, well, we use, in our case, since it's ES&S, USB drives to transport them. But the thing is, then you go to a system. Here's the thing. We can't even get the same answer from different probate judges in the different counties because they're all handling it. Wait a minute. How are you doing it differently? And two, once a USB, again, is inserted into a system that is connected to the internet and then goes back, is it ever checked? No. I'm telling you, although in the testing labs, when I put stuff on the drives, on the ES&S system, because we're talking USB drives. I've done it on all of them. I put they were harmless, but they were files that were not detected. Any USB security that these vendors are claiming is a bold-faced lie, because it doesn't work. It's not incorporated. And I know I've tested these things. Was that ever in the final test report that went to the EAC? That's a whole nother question. But I can tell you they wouldn't. And the fact that, because that would be the excuse, that's how we do it real time. We sneaker net it over with a drive. But is it a brand new drive each and every time? Are you checking them out for malware? No, that's not. And I can tell you one of the attack methods is through the USBs or compact flash.
Okay. Now let's dive deeper into our election issues in Alabama. To me, election integrity is the most important issue that there is. There's not, while so many other issues are important, this is the most important in my mind, because we can talk about so many other issues, but if we cannot hold our public officials accountable and have a way to unseat them, and our vote truly doesn't count, then we are 100% controlled, and we're already a communist country, in my opinion, or at least getting very close to that point. So let's just jump right to this. In 2022, in the 22 election in Alabama, primarily the Republican primary, I remember seeing in real time 30,000 votes disappear from Tim James and go to Kay Ivey. And then 4 minutes later, they disappeared from Kay Ivey and went back to Tim James. Mm-hmm. I remember a certain individual, Dean Odle, which we both know Dean very well. His votes froze for about 2 hours. And I believe when it was at about the 11,000 count. So that just goes to show me something was happening there, because votes don't just disappear like that in real time. And then the next morning, every candidate had less votes than they did the night of the election. So could you explain us a little bit about what you saw in Alabama firsthand, given your experience?
Well, the quickest way to explain this is called corruption. It's a steal. I hate to laugh about it, but it's just because watching that, to see those numbers do that, math is the core to anything, right? These electronic voting systems are software programming. They're software. It's poorly written, crappy software, right? That are running on laptops and desktop servers and stuff. So that's all it is. It's nothing but math, and math has parameters. And when you see those type of things happening, and you wait a minute, if you understand the process of these machines, the way they work and how they're set up, by the time those things get reported there, they say they're unofficial only because the state's not conducted certification, right? They do their canvassing board and certify it. But those are the same results that'll be reported for certification. So how do they drop and lower and change? They're being manipulated. These reports, like for SIDL, as we have here to use in Alabama, why does our data have to go through a Portuguese company to get to the news? And then
I saw that.
And then it changed. And the web behind all this is part of it. And the way they manipulate it, because they judge it and they pull numbers. That's the freeze and the slow numbers is what in 2020 I knew what was going on. That election night, I still remember we went to the bedroom, we got the TV on, we're watching it. And again, a guy who spent 9 years in voting system test labs, testing a couple of the facilities, because we had them here in Alabama. And I knew when the numbers froze up, and I'd seen some of the flips like that, on the thing, I was like, wait, how's that happening? And I knew how it's happening because I knew how bad the machines were. And I said, they're actually doing what I know could be done. And I still remember I looked to my left, my wife, I said, this happened. This is bad. I knew. And we woke up in the morning, Trump had lost, and it was just total chaos. And it's the same thing that happened in 2022 in Alabama. The same type of thing. It's just a smaller scale. The numbers were shifted. And we evaluated just the return numbers and the way they were came in and processed and stuff, there were 5 races that were just no sense. All you can say, and that's what I love about Let My People Go, because Dr. Walter Daughtry, Walter and I talk for hours on the end about stuff. We sort of nerd out, but he's such a brilliant guy, and he does very good about explaining things. The statistical possibility of them being the same percentage of lost in different types of races is almost impossible. And that's what happened during the primary. And so, again, Mimo Ivy, I refuse to use the term governor with her name because she did not legitimately win the primary.
Right.
And I'm saying, this is not the first time I've said this publicly.
So easy to see.
Yeah. And I say that because just based off the math of the returns, the mathematics of the returns can't be. If this was in a security operations center, the manager would be calling, grab me the server images, grab me the workstation images, capture the network traffic, give me the network logs, because you would know there was an outside force that affected those numbers and it has to be investigated. Yet nothing was done. And we went into the general, guess what? The R's won. Just like they always do now, even though this state was stolen a long time ago from the D's by the deep state in Washington, D.C., the Republicans up there. It's total flip. And so Alabama was a smaller scale of 2020 during that 2022 primary.
Yeah, that's what I understand. Yeah. Very, very similar, very clear to see.
Oh, and if I may, there's one other point that relates us to a sheriff's county race in Spotsylvania, Virginia.
ES&S machines as well?
Oh, that's the link. Down to the version. Down to the same exact version. This sheriff who was going to investigate election laws and the issues, right? He campaigned on that. He was killing it in the polls, right? Even in exit polls, he was done. But guess what? It was like almost his percentages were flipped. And they exactly matched the same percentage point to like 0.1 or 0.2 decimal point of the 5 different races in Alabama. Same year, same time, same system. Could we say same algorithm?
Was the F curve present in that flipping? Did you see the shoot up right there at the end?
I had yet to get all their data from that case. Let's just say that case didn't go too well. He decided to drop it, I think, due to outside pressure. Let's just put it that way. And but in this process, how I stated earlier about if a state law violates the state constitution, I'd actually read the Virginia state constitution and even their state law that says you can't move the DS-200, the tabulators have to be in public view. But their constitution says that they have to be counted in public. So can you see inside the DS-200 when you walk into the precinct? Can you see your vote?
Absolutely not.
No. And so they had yet raised another case outside of that one to challenge the existence of the machines.
And it's so funny because we both know that John Merrill was the gatekeeper for this highly compromised voting system. But yet when he speaks at these groups and these meetings, he continues to say that we have paper ballots and we don't need to get rid of the machines. And at the same time, Donald Trump is now pushing to get rid of the machines. At the same time, you hear him bragging about how he goes down to Mar-a-Lago a lot. But from what I've heard from an insider in the Trump campaign is they have his number. And that's very funny. It's very funny. And I'm just... it shows you what a politician really looks like. That's for sure. So
that's exactly correct.
So while we know John Merrill was clearly the gatekeeper, he's clearly protecting these compromised voting machines for some reason. Why is our new Secretary of State not doing anything about it?
Oh, because he's, again, a politician. It's the same reason he hasn't met with me and a couple of other election integrity people that he wanted to have a meeting with so he could learn. Even though before he was Secretary of State, he was on the Alabama election board, the electronic election board. And so when you're on that board and you're voting to whether to allow ES&S to implement a change order, right, to make changes to the voting system, you sort of got to know the election process, wouldn't you think?
Absolutely.
So how can you claim ignorance and then now you're here and then you claim, oh, we got rid of Eric. Big deal. big deal. Now we have Avid. We're still freely sharing our voter roll information with 7 other states, and we don't have any auditing capability. Who has access to that data? Who can read, write? Who can change people's addresses or take them from not disabled, what do they call it? Inactive, from inactive to active voter? We know none of this, and they did that. And he claims they're in the process of getting rid of, 1,600 illegals or 3,000 or something illegals that shouldn't have been registered. Why? How did they get registered? Why aren't you investigating that? Again, he's a politician, the same as John Merrill. Not publicly as bad, because John Merrill's got a wicked past, and we know he's went to China. Otherwise, we wouldn't have got 60,000 masks if he hadn't have done it. I guess he truly thinks that Alabamians are that stupid to buy that baloney. It's because that's truly what it was.
It's insulting.
Yeah,
just to be around him and hear the way he talks to us and the citizens like we're not smart enough to know the difference.
Truly.
Yeah.
True that way. It's very disrespectful, especially to women and elderly women.
Yes. And you brought up Wes Allen refusing to meet with you. So I want to go ahead and, of course, I know the answer to this question, but I want to go ahead and give you a chance to tell your side of the story here. So when I've spoken with a couple individuals about, hey, why are we not giving presentations within Montgomery? Why can't we get rid of our voting machines here when they clearly need to be done away with? One of the comments I've heard from a friend was, well, Clay Parikh spends so much time going to other states. Why doesn't he come to Alabama? Could you go ahead and explain what's the issues and the obstacles you've run into by trying to address our Alabama legislator?
Because our legislator refused to want to talk about issues. Because believe me, we can focus on one point, just like for HB 30. Remember, I testified in our Alabama court case, which was the first court case. This is how I got into election integrity. Everybody always, Kerry Lake's expert witness. And I was in federal court for Kerry Lake and Mark Fincham prior to that. When I went and played, I was just supposed to help, again, because I'm the insider from the voting system test labs that basically exposed how bad certification was. And that was because they only knew about me because of the Alabama case that was coming. And so I did prep, I did research. When I bring up the laws and the issues that we have that are concerning elections, none of them want to hear it. None of them. They don't want to. When I have people in Wyoming that want me to speak to their county commissioners, and their county commissioners are there, and then I speak to their Secretary of State, he invites me to a call. Why? Because you want to bring in the expert. And again, I don't charge people. You know what I'm saying? I ask them to cover my cost. And that county which just humbles you so much, that county had 9,000 people, if that. And they covered my cost. They had tip jars in the back of the county complex where I spoke, right? And they brought in baked goods and all that. But they wanted to hear me. They wanted to hear what I had to say. And guess what I spoke to them about? ES&S. I threw up slides that we presented here in Alabama at county levels and at lunches. And I've been, focused on America, 5 Strong, Eagle Forum. I go around and speak to that. But when it comes time to dealing with county officials, the only ones that have really been forthcoming were Crenshaw County. They asked me. That's been the only county. As far as going down the state side, I went down to Montgomery. It was hard for me to maintain my cool seeing how our representatives acted, and just from hearing the conversations about the bill and the compromises and what they were already agreed to, I knew before it got out of hearing it was going to pass the House, just from the conversations I heard, which disgusted me because it let me know those representatives don't give a flip about Alabamians. They're there to do whatever good old boy stuff they're doing down there in Montgomery and could care less. And that's what aggravates me when people attack me for that. I testified in court. I've done a lot of research. I've talked and tried to pursue things. I went 4.5 hours to Crenshaw County to answer questions and look at the systems, which helped us greatly in the Alabama course, even though that didn't go our way. Our state Supreme Court said we as residents have no standing. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
You know
How disrespectful.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's our election. The state runs off our hard-earned tax money.
Absolutely.
They don't produce anything. We have every right. We've got more standing than anything. And then you've got me in the most unique spot. I'm the only security person there is that knows these voting systems, and yet ignored. Just like it with HB 30. I can see I'm going to have to try to grab a senator before the hearing myself, because the representative sponsoring this bill said she was, so it could be amended appropriately. It's already been amended and gotten worse. So that's it. So when people throw that at me, how come I can speak and be asked questions by the Georgia State Election Board? At least the Georgia board listens to the people. I'm not even a resident of Georgia, but
that's the most corrupt one out of them all.
Yeah,
correct?
yes. But the board is trying to do good. It's their AG, their Secretary of State, and the governor that are bad in Georgia. But the state election board's fighting hard for them, and they ask me questions. Why? Because they understand I'm the expert, and it's not so much about me, but they want to work for their people. And so they asked. Believe me, I've been in the Atlanta Capitol more than I have my own Capitol in Montgomery. And why? Because they asked me to come. They want to hear from me, and because they're fighting, and it's upsetting when my own state doesn't. They work a bill, and I find out about it because it's on the list, and it's like I read it and I'm like, no, we shouldn't do this. Because here's what I'm going to tell you, especially HB 30, it's the epitome of throw the peasants a bone. It is Montgomery trying to say, hey, we did this for you. It does nothing. It's worthless. But here you go. Here's your crumbs. Shut up and go about your business and leave us alone. And that's exactly what it is. It's the same way. What was it, SB 19, the COVID thing, where they stood up and Meemaw signed that one off into law. But it provided no protection for the workers. There was no punishment to the businesses that tried to mandate the vaccine. And believe me,
I remember.
I fought my own company. I fought other companies on behalf of people I went to church for. Because I know the worst thing about it is everybody knows me from the election integrity, but I know contract law quite well. I've worked on a lot of big proposals. I understand it all. And so I fought back to include with my own vice president of my company, who was supposed to be handling that stuff, because I just called it out for what it was. You cannot mandate that. You cannot mandate religious exemption stuff. There's no way the Alabama medical board should have any say-so. You could be a Druid if you want. That's between you and your God. And that's the best thing about America is we allow religious freedom. And so you can't question mine. And as a Christian, there's no person has authority over that. It's between me and my Savior, Jesus Christ. That's my direct line to God, and I talk to him every day. And so,
amen.
And I'm sorry I got off on the COVID thing, but it's just the infuriation that we made a law. Look what we did for you. But it had no teeth. It didn't help us one bit. And it's the same way. If you want to do this, HB 30 is a foot in the door. It's what I've been told by the same people who say, well, I don't help Alabama. It's to get our foot in the door and then we'll change it. Do we change the one to where we say that we'll have no ranked choice voting? But guess what? In the third paragraph of that section of the law, they allow it for provision or for absentee ballots in Uocava, right? How can you do that? If you can allow that because of some U.S. code, then you've given it out. And now you've got Uocava voters, their ballots being evaluated different from yours. Again, a violation of state and federal law. And they have it in the bill. That should be corrected. The election board had only asked 3 questions on a change, which any ITX expert will tell you that's irrelevant. And they asked that, according to that, again, ask Wes Allen. He was on the election board. And they buy off on the changes. And they don't look to improve those things. And there's a couple other laws that I could get into too, but but they don't want to hear it. And that's the frustrating part. And then they told me I don't care about my own state.
And to be clear, you're obviously the most qualified, experienced person to talk to when it comes to the election issues. And Wes Allen still has not tried to reach back out to you or meet with you at all. Just completely ignores you.
Yes. And the two guys who traveled around this state a lot that he went to, why? Because in our presentation, there were a bunch of good, it was a Republican women luncheon, or it was a bunch of mama bears had questions. And so they surrounded him. And so then it was, oh, hey, I don't know any of this. Hey, can you guys meet up with me and brief me and explain what all this is? And blah, blah. So he did the political thing.
Plausible deniability.
Yep. And he got that, so it calmed the beast down there. The mama bears eased up, and he's like, oh, he's going to learn this and get on it, right, and come back to it. And yet still, and again, why does the Secretary of State of Wyoming ask me to be on a Zoom call with him twice to ask questions?
And this is so funny because now it appears that Wes Allen is just trying to run away from accountability as quickly as he can by now running for lieutenant governor.
Oh, yeah.
So he's going to ask for our vote when refusing to do his job in the, of course, the position that he's in now.
I'd just like for him to answer, how come we allow people, because we have voter ID in Alabama, but what good is voter ID when you don't require ID to register to vote?
I see.
Why we have online registration that doesn't require ID? Because guess what? If I register to vote, if I'm a non-resident, can I get a driver's license in the state of Alabama? That is yes.
Yes, you sure can.
So there's an issue, and there's a logic flaw, and this has been presented to them. Why do they not look into this? Why do they not act? Because they want us to be over 100% of registered voters. We're over that. Dr. Frank just updated. See, and the fact that I am the expert in the machines in that area. I work with a lot of different people in election integrity, from voter rolls to everything. And like Dr. Frank, even we were on a call for Tina Peters. We were doing a massive online all-day podcast type thing. And we were talking backstage. He said, hey, well, I have new charts, and he said the 2024 or 5 data. And the thing is to get Alabama stuff, it's almost impossible. And I want to beat this home, because to charge an Alabama resident $37,000 to $38,000 for voter rolls when we freely share them with 7 other states and we got no idea what's being done with them, right? And to allow politicians down in Montgomery to get them for free just because they've got stuff to do, what kind of fairness is that?
Yeah, I've heard many states are free for the voter rolls, $200, $400.
Yeah, Georgia's complaining about having to spend $400 and something now. Where Florida and Texas, every 30 days they give them.
And we had to pay $40,000 for our election. Hey, thank Mike Lindell for coming out and purchasing those for a lot of them. That helped us a lot. Yeah,
and again, no matter what people, that's a true patriot, and he's a man of God. That I know, believe me, I've spent enough time with him.
It's so sad to see what they did to Mike Lindell and trying to discredit him. And he was right there on the front line, sacrificing like more than anybody that I was aware of.
But the best thing is, people know. People aren't stupid like they think we are. And a lot of it is too because everybody's turned off the big media, the news. They want to get their information from people like you. They want to get it from podcasts, from different media types. That's why people spend so much more time on social media now. That's where you get the real news. You're not going to get that. Look, I've seen people thank him. A man literally took off his very expensive rodeo belt to give to him because people know what he's had to go through in the fight that goes on, and just simply to get our elections fixed. Because just like you said earlier, if we don't have free and fair elections, the country's lost.
Yeah, so many people would say, oh, well, he's just trying to sell pillows. And I'm like, do you know how many stores canceled him for speaking up and doing what was right? I mean, the sacrifices he made. So, of course, he's got to continue to advertise. I mean, it's not cheap getting this information out there, especially when you're fighting that big tech machine that's trying to censor you. It's everything you can to try to get the word out there.
And he's had lawsuits going against him. And there are, look, I s all I can tell you is, even though people still support him, he's still struggling because Alabama's not the only state that he's helped in election integrity. He's he knows this country will be lost if we don't restore free and fair elections, and he puts his money where his mouth is. And the other thing is it's hurt just more than his pillow thing. You know, he was a drug addict, and
Yeah.
he's got a big program to help recovering people, and it's sad that even that, because when they mess with his banks and stuff like that, they mess with those programs to where he's trying to help people recover and everything. Yeah, and this is stuff that he does as a charity because he believes what you give is going to come back tenfold, and he freely gives to help people, and that's what's sad. And he's helped so many people that couldn't find the legal help, right? With helping them get legal help and finding people that would definitely do it. Because I met maybe 2 lawyers that actually do stuff pro bono in this fight, which I find astonishing because it's a lot of time to fight this big, it's a big corruption evil. It's
absolutely,
yeah.
So hard to find people that are willing to sacrifice for their country.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now a lot of people don't know this, but me and you both know that this is not really that complicated. It is as simple as gaining access to the cast vote record file. If we could just do that, which from what I understand, we are legally entitled to that as citizens. We paid for our elections. We pay our elected officials. So we are 100% entitled to that cast vote record file, that little thumb drive that we could plug into the machine, and that we can download the cast vote record file. It'll tell us everything that happened in detail in every single election. But yet, when you try to go get it from our counties, they refuse to give it to us. Why is that?
That's basically on direction of the state. And that's to put it simple. And they'll claim that's not, because here's the thing: Alabama is typical when compared to a lot of other states, where the secretaries of states, and I'm saying it plural because it's a lot of them, have overstepped their bounds. According to the Alabama Constitution, counties run the election. And they can tell the state to go shove it, right? Especially when it comes to the machine. All it takes is a simple resolution adopted by the county, and they can ignore it. And the reason I bring this up is because I've checked with attorneys on this, right? Matter of fact, one attorney in Alabama is the one that brought this up and did a lot of great detailed look into it. And so the counties have the authority. But while they're listening to the state, while the Secretary of State mandates and directs how they get trained, basically by the vendor to give the same propaganda lies that they give, and they do that. Now, a lot of them will say, well, we don't produce the cast vote record, the system can't. Again, a lie. And they're getting told that because they're directed to do that and the way they're trained to do it. But ES&S can produce the cast vote record just like Dominion, Smartmatic, Hart Civic, any of them. And again, I've tested over 7 different vendors. I think I know what I'm talking about. And so this cast vote record, and here's the thing, it's not top secret. I'm saying this as a person who has a top secret security clearance, right? It's not state secrets, as some secretaries of states try to claim it is, right? It's simple election data and information. It's the diary that won't point out, it won't tell me how you voted because your identity is not within it, right? It's just the ballots, the ballot images, the counts, the numbers, everything. But it's the diary of the voting system. And it's produced, and it can be produced. And to say that we don't produce it, then how do they get the reports and all the data to the Secretary of State for state certification? It's part of the process. There are a bunch of reports that get generated. I know I help a lot of attorneys write subpoenas for different cases in different states, right? I do this all the time. And so the cast vote record should be a public record document.
And to me, that is the proof right there of corruption. Mm-hmm. Why else would they try to hide and violate our rights by not giving us access to that file?
Yep.
when it can tell us everything we need to know? If there's nothing to hide, why not let us see it?
That's exactly it. And that's the point. Why? If it's just like some of the test reports, and I've dealt with this in different states, they refuse to show the test report. And you're like, well, why? You said, because some states certify their own systems, like Alabama does, even though we require it to go through a federal lab. I know I've tested our older systems before. And the thing is if you have a state law that says no Wi-Fi and you had the report, why not show the people the report? It'll clearly say there's no Wi-Fi, right? And then we check. And I've seen it because states ask for different frequency. They ask for the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth, even cellular. And yet, nope, can't show you the report. Why? The people paid for it. The government, any state is paid by the taxpayers of that state.
That's
and so
right.
why can't they see the report that shows, yeah, we're true? So your point's valid. You only hide it if you know there's something bad going on. It's that plain simple. Why? Because you don't want the cast vote record out there. Because now there are hundreds of citizens, right, they spend their spare time doing that. They're either analyzing databases, like I have a couple of people here in Alabama. I have two wonderful women that actually know databases really well that have helped me. And again, not with Alabama. Why? Because Alabama doesn't share the data, doesn't give up the data, right?
And that's why they say we're the fourth most politically corrupt state.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
I don't know. I think we're pushing number 3. I'm reading it.
Sounds
Georgia.
more accurate to me. Sounds a lot more accurate.
Yeah.
If Georgia's willing to hear you out and Alabama doesn't,
Yeah.
hey, maybe we're the first.
Yep.
And we just don't know it yet.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Their state election board actually has meetings and does things. You know when the last time our election board met? 2022. Parliamentary procedures. And when you charter and establish a board, and I don't care what type of board it is, there are rules that you have to follow. And that's done in the state. Yet there's no, and I brought that up down in Montgomery. Nobody wanted to hear about that, right?
Yeah.
And then I got told, well, they don't even know what they're doing, an admission of guilt. They don't even know what they're doing. So we need to ask West Allen, hey, when you were on state election board, did you know what you were doing? You know, you claim ignorance, and yet now you're Secretary of State, because what I've heard is being on that Alabama election board is like your stepping stone to the Secretary of State. It's one of the check marks, right? You know, because the musical chairs in Montgomery is the way I like to refer to it. They decide on who's going to what seat next.
Well, now that Trump has issued an executive order to overhaul our election systems, have we heard a peep out of anyone in Montgomery that's on board with that, has any plans to work together with Trump to help Alabama fix our obviously compromised voting machines?
So I'd had lunch with a state official, and they told me a response they got from somebody down the House about bringing up an issue, and they said Trump's intent. Here's what I'm telling you: I'm 1 degree out from that circle, right? And so I knew when he posts stuff either on Truth Social or when the executive order was coming, because I know when he's been called, I know when he's been briefed and what he's been briefed on and who's done it. That's how much. And so when they make statements down there in Montgomery and they use Trump's name in vain, and that's what I'm going to say it, I tell them, I told them, well, no, you need to come tell me, because I said I can tell you for whether that's true or not. They are using Trump's name in vain, right, to make you think that there are people, Republicans, when they're not. They're not MAGA. Again, they most of them, if you look a decade back, they were probably had a D behind their name. You know, they're about themselves and not Alabamians, and so. That's what really infuriates me about down there, is because I hate when the Republican Party said vote straight ticket, right? I'm not a stupid Alabamian. You know, I was born and raised here, but I took a ribbon in the military about, you know, my combat boots were my first pair of shoes from guys from Ohio and New England and stuff. And you deal with that, right? But I'm not slow and I'm not stupid, and I'm not going. When I know a person is not a good person and you're a criminal, just because you got an R behind your name, I'm not going to vote for you. I'll vote for the Libertarian. I'll vote for a Democrat. I don't care. I'm a registered Republican, but I'm not voting for you for party. I'm voting for you off your character and what you say you're going to do for this state and me, And
Amen
that's
to that.
Yeah, and that's what we've got to have. But they put on a show because they think we're that gullible, and it's sad. It's truly sad.
So is there any hope that you see in the future of Alabama as far as our elections are concerned?
Internally within Alabama, I'm less hopeful. I don't see anybody of courage down in Montgomery to straighten anything out. Like I said, Wes Allen, he came in, jumped on I got rid of Eric, but yet now we went to Avid. The same tools are there. They changed the name. There's been nothing to fix anything. And so internally, no. I think once pressure from the federal side of the house, as we've seen Trump's administration putting forth, especially on election integrity, wanting paper ballots to be watermarked and to be hand counted, that kind of pressure is going to force a lot of states to have to contend with it. Because, two, we have the same voting systems. The same one for federal elections is used for state elections, used for municipal elections. Then we don't have two separate systems. They're all used. So when federal makes one part of the law, they're going to have to bite on it. And it's going to be the force, I think, to help take care of the rhinos in this state.
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
Now, last thing, Clay, the excuse that I've heard out of a lot of our state legislators with their concern to not want to do away with our voting machines is that they say that if we went to paper ballot, that would be too expensive. What's your response to that?
Here, well, first, that's a totally ridiculous argument. And nobody would ever sit down at the table and discuss this with somebody like myself who understands the technical capabilities of the systems, machines in general, the cost, and then processes and procedures. The thing is I'm a computer science person, but I'm a systems major. I've been a system security engineer. I understand design. And what I can tell you is, and she came to Alabama. Linda Rance, part of Calls of America, has taught hand counting. We had a lot of county people show up for that and travel to Huntsville where we conducted it. I attended a later class, both me and my wife. I can tell you I evaluated it. It's the best overall system. It fit perfectly with Alabama law. And the best thing about it is counties are different sizes. So this thing was scalable, adaptable, and it's a lot more efficient. So now we're paying how many millions of dollars to ES&S to process paper that they never show us with machines that are faulty. And then if we talk about the express vote, there's already an executive order saying no more barcodes. How do you deal with that? And what I would tell them, the excuse they'll give out of Montgomery, I know, is, well, what about that? I read the Help America Vote Act, HAVA, in 2008. Probably before most U.S. citizens knew it even existed. It says nothing about machines being required to help people with disabilities. It says you provide assistance. That's what the grant money was for. And I can tell you, our probate judge in Madison County claims that we don't even get grant money anymore, and he hadn't needed it in years. That's his story. But so the cost, and it's been analyzed in different states and across the things, going paper and hand counting is a whole lot cheaper. When they talk about county workers and elect poll workers having to stay and work, there are enough citizens that will come in and start counting on it. And even if you did pay them what you pay a poll worker, would still be cheaper than these machines.
Oh, absolutely.
And when they bring that up, my question is, why do you allow ES&S to sell us machines statewide? And then you also, did you know that they control the voter rolls and voter registration data? We have the same private sector vendor that won't let us see anything controlling every aspect of our election.
So they have a monopoly on the voting system.
Oh, yes.
Oh, wow.
And the one probate judge I talked to, who was wanting, I asked him a few questions and show me things. Well, I can't really demonstrate anything because the USBs aren't here. They're in Nebraska. Why is our Alabama data go to Nebraska and get configured. Is it configured correctly? Is it checked? We don't even do half of what's called logic and accuracy tests that other states do. We don't even do half of that here. We put on dog and pony shows, hence why in the chaos that existed in the dog and pony show where Angela Shepard was able to throw in all those ballots, right? That is not any kind of formal testing. And to quote my probate judge, if I want to see the logic and accuracy test, I have to put in a public records request. Why does Arizona and all these other states post it on the Secretary of State's site? It's because it's a sham and it's a lot more expensive. Machines are 10 times more expensive than to go paper ballots and hand. And we're going to say hand counting because the first thing I'm going to tell you, oh, we have paper ballots. We just lock them up in a jail cell and you'll never be able to look at them. And we don't save all the images. So all that auditing can't be done. You're not going to catch us in our cheat, in our selections.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All smoke and mirrors.
So that's exactly it. And again, they think we're that naive, you know, and the logic and accuracy tests that they do, it's a public event and they do it and they say, oh, well, we do other tests. Yeah, sure. Show me that you did them. And they won't because they can't, because they're not doing them. There's the 31st, I'm going to Georgia again, to Atlanta, on part of a state Secretary of State investigation because of a county where there's plenty of evidence to show that they didn't do them. And the county's been lying. And the judges ordered them to expose it. So now it's at the state level being investigated. Whether that'll be anything will happen is that. But we don't get anything like that here in Alabama. Because just like you said, we can't get cast vote records. We can't even get all the public information we're supposed to have. Voter rolls should be public.
Absolutely.
Anything we paid for, we should be able to see, and that's everything. Why? Did you know about ES&S? I'm going to ask you a question. Did you know about ES&S owning the contract for our voter registration and voter rolls?
I did not.
You did not. Why? It was paid. That contract's paid with state money. Do you pay Alabama state taxes?
I do.
Guess what? Any federal contract, guess what? You look it up online. They'll tell you the cost and all that. Now, security details and specifics, some things may be hidden, but at least you know where the federal tax dollars are going, right?
Yeah.
Whether this $2 billion contract to Lockheed or this, $8 million contract to Northrop Grumman or whatever it is going on, you're going to know that this is how much we pay and this is the general stuff that they're doing. But yet, does the Secretary of State post that stuff on the Alabama site? No. Wes Allen actually hides more stuff than John Merrill does.
Really?
Oh, believe me, I'm on the Secretary of State's side a lot. A lot of stuff has disappeared. Why? Probably because it's been talked about and questioned. So it's better to hide it than to show it.
Now, more than John Merrill, that's bad.
Yes, it is.
Now, so it's clear that we do not have safe and secure elections in Alabama.
No.
So for somebody watching this podcast and is just as frustrated as we are and wants to do something about it and get involved, what would you tell those people?
I would tell them to look in your local area and get involved with the grassroots groups that are there. We have several of them in Alabama, like Five Strong, Focus on America, Eagle Forum, and they're a little bit different. I got to a grassroots group, Focus on America, because of the COVID. And I heard, and the funny thing is that group, they wanted to take back the school boards, the local stuff, which is a lot of manipulation. So you've got to get with a grassroots group that wants to do that. Even if it doesn't seem election related, if they're smart, they're going to know you have to get the elections to be fair and free and honest. And there has to be integrity. If there's not, because in every small town, I bet you in Alabama, they're seeing apartments being built. Even though your utilities and your water probably is having a hard time keeping up, like in Huntsville, it's horrible. But you got to ask why they're doing that. Everybody thinks that the attack's at the federal level. It goes all the way down to the county. And so you need to get involved with a grassroots group. Number one, always pray. That's good. But we're now in the time of act. If you're sitting on your couch accepting it, Alabama, it's going to go just like the way of the Romans. We're going to get fat, lazy, and entitled and think we're free when it's just an illusion of freedom, and we're going to lose it. You've got to get up and act. You've got to get involved, whether they're telling you to call Montgomery and bug the heck out of that senator or that representative, or whether it's talking to your neighbors, sharing, let my people go, right?
Absolutely.
That in Georgia, when I went to testify, there's a gentleman that was staring at me, and he kept saying, I had no idea, and he kept looking at me, and then he comes over, he goes, "You're that guy in that movie, aren't you?" And I was like, "Which one?" Because I've done several. Yeah. And he goes, "Then let my people go." Every night he invited different neighbors over for dinner, and they would watch the movie and talk about it. And I'm only in that thing for like 2 minutes or something. Oh, but he just remembered it because he's watched it that many times, and to convince his neighbors, and they talk about it.
And that's what people usually do. It's, we're so used to being sent videos and clips that we don't look at it all. But man, let my people go. That is a drop everything and must watch. Yeah. So when people do finally watch it, it's always the same comment I hear: "How have I not heard of this?" It's always, and then they share it with everybody. It's great.
It's because you're being censored, and everybody commends Elon for X, formerly Twitter, being what it is. It's still not. I will post something that pretty much grabs a lot of people, and boom, and I'll have 100-something followers from that day. One time I had 2,000 extra followers jump on board, right?
Yeah.
But when you see your total number, and you're looking at your notification, oh, I got 200 more followers. Then you look at your total count, and you lost 5.
Oh yeah,
and it's the conservative side, and plenty of, even I've seen Professor David Clemens do it. You're supposed to say, "Hey, please respond if you can see this post." It's just a test, because I've been the same way. I've been shadow banned. The manipulation's still out there because they don't want them. They don't want you awake. They want you woke and believing in the psyop. And so I say it on ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN. You just say CIA. It's propaganda to the 10th degree. They all speak the same thing. You've got to go to the alternate media, the podcast. The people who, like you, do the investigations, look into the local matters, know what you're talking about, and that's the way it spreads. I hate to be off on this, but the apartments in the 2030 agenda. We got Ann Eubanks here. She's in Birmingham area, I believe. She's spoken to a group before she even spoke to us because I posted about that event. One of the guys who does a podcast in Georgia. Hey, we're having that same thing. He called me up, can I have her speak, and this great. And that. And she got on the judge. That's how we do it. It's communicating person to person, right? And then the tools that we have when we have social media and stuff in these podcasts, we spread that out. And that's the way we've got to do it. If we don't act and we don't start communicating as humans, we'll lose it. If you stay closed up, it's just 2 weeks, right?
That's right.
And that's what they want. They want you closed up in your house, sitting on the couch, eating the poison, so you can just waste away and we lose it all. And so we got to act, and you got to communicate. Share this information.
Clay Parikh, thank you so much for everything that you do, and I really appreciate you coming on.
It's been a pleasure to be here anytime.
Thank you.